How many of you guys like to go fishing? Got any fishermen? Fisher ladies? It is an exciting thing to watch a fish jump up out of the water. And especially if it's a really big fish. And especially if that really big fish is attached to the other end of your line. Right? It is an exhilarating thing to have that happen. But these particular fish that were in this video are Pacific salmon. There are a variety of different kinds of salmon, but the Pacific salmon is kind of a unique species. There are some others that kind of have similar traits. So what I thought I would do is like dig into it, like go whole National Geographic and like dig in and try to figure out like, you know, why exactly do these fish swim upstream? And I knew some of the answers already, but I wanted to get some of the more specific details. So they actually go upstream because their biological clock is ticking, and it tells them they need to go back to where they started from. And so they started in a small, shallow freshwater stream. And as the early parts of their life began, they were washed down from that freshwater stream into the ocean, saltwater. And so they're a highly adaptable fish, and they spend a bulk of their life in the ocean where they gain 99% of their weight. But as that time clock is ticking, they find their way back to that freshwater stream and work the way back up to it where they started at. Because they need to start the reproductive cycle all over again for the next generation. And the baby fish, the eggs, have a much better chance of surviving in the shallow, in that fresh water, than they do where they are. And so then when they get all the way up there, it's actually giving the next generation the best possible chance to start and to exist. And so as those eggs hatch, then those babies, again, they start that journey downstream. And as they're growing, they're facing bigger dangers. They're able to survive a little bit better. But it's kind of crazy to think that they lay, each female, between 2,000 and 10,000 eggs. And only about 1% of those salmon make it back up to lay eggs again, or to complete the reproductive cycle. Only 1%. That's horribly small, but why is that? I think there's a lot of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of natural predators that exist. You know, between the bears and the whales and the sea lions, and there's just a lot of natural predators. There's a lot of, you know, fishing that goes on. Some of us like to eat salmon. I am not one of them, but if you do, like, I'm not going to hold that against you. I like fish, it's just not salmon. Like, when I grew up, it was a salmon patty, and the only way I could stomach it was with ketchup, and I needed that thing to taste like ketchup. Like, that was the only way I could do it. And one time as an adult, I thought, you know what, I'm going to have like grilled salmon, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I had it, and I'm like, nope, it tastes like I remember, and like, no, I can't do it. But there's the natural predators. There's also things like pollution that exists. People have made dams in the place. They've rerouted rivers, and so for the salmon to make it back up the stream isn't near as easy as it used to be. And so by the time that they actually get there, they are completely different fish, right? Some of them change colors for the mating rituals that are going on, but the fight to get upstream leaves them bruised. They get a humpback, a lot of them, like this hooked jaw in the front. They look kind of different than the way they started out. And it could take them about 6 months to make it back up to where they started at. 6 months. But get this, they can swim over 30 miles a day. That's like more than running a marathon every day. That's insane. Like, I don't even want to come near close to that. And they can jump over 6 feet out of the water. And they need that kind of propulsion to get up and over the rapids as they're approaching. But they can jump that high. Like, I'm not 6 feet, so I'm going above my head, right? Like, woo, hey, there went one. Like, it's crazy to think that this kind of thing can happen. But I think there's a lot of interesting parallels between what we're talking about and the life of that salmon. Because you see that salmon realize that they have to get back home. And you and I need to realize that our home isn't downstream. right? We may spend a lot of our time in this pond we call earth, right? But this isn't home. Our home is upstream. Our home is in heaven. And one day, yeah, heaven comes down to earth, but right now it's not that time. And so we're keeping our nose towards home. And a salmon, the way they find their way home is that scientists say they have an amazing sense of smell. They can smell the minerals in the water and get back to where they were within meters of where they grew up. And that's crazy. But another crazy thing is that within a couple of days of having laid the eggs or having the spawning process done, the adults usually die. Most of them. And if they haven't died within a couple days, it's soon after. And the only way that they give new life is by passing away. Death is what leads to life. That sounds maybe spiritual or something. The death of Jesus is the only thing that leads to you and I having new life. And as the adults pass away, their body decomposes and deposits minerals into the stream, the same minerals that feed the young as they're growing in that very stream. And if it wasn't for the parents making the journey, the babies would never exist. And if it wasn't for the parents dying, the babies wouldn't have the nutrients to live. And even though the babies never get a chance to meet mom and dad are integral in providing the support structure that they need to survive. And you and I, we set the tone as parents, as adults, for future generations. And you know what? Sometimes we're going to pass away. And sometimes people aren't even going to know that we ever existed. But the minerals that we deposit are going to make a lasting impact that feeds future generations. The things that we're doing right now at Connection Christian Church, in gathering a group of people in Columbus, Nebraska, you know, a lot of the names that have been a part of this church will be lost 50 years from now. But guess what? 50 years from now, the saving grace of Christ, the minerals we deposit, will be live and well in future generations. And those future generations, they're going to wash downstream and they're going to scatter across the face of the earth. And they're going to take a little piece of connection with them. But more importantly, they're going to take the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. That's an exciting thing. Right? To see this whole thing taking place is an amazing parallel to Scripture. But I think one of the bigger parallels is this. Jesus is constantly challenging His followers in the New Testament to live the kind of life that leads them to going upstream. And what I mean by that is that we exist in a culture that's creating this powerful current that's sweeping through. And the easy thing to do is to allow the current to capture us and we just go with the flow. Right? That's the easy thing to do. Matter of fact, that's what the average person is doing. The average person is just going with the flow. You know, what's everybody else doing? That's what I want to do. I don't want to stand out. Don't want to be different. Don't want to have to work at it too hard. I just want to go with the flow. Right? But Jesus steps in and He's challenging the followers that we need to push it. We need to go against the flow. We need to go upstream. We need to go in a direction that most people aren't going, that they're not willing to go. We talked about this earlier this year in a series we called Raising the Bar. And if you weren't with us during that series and want to go through the Sermon on the Mount, you can go into our app or you can go online and you can watch the series Raising the Bar, in which we talked about the most powerful sermon that Jesus ever preached that's recorded in Scripture. And he is constantly going against the flow. He's constantly challenging the believers to step it up. And He's looking at the internal things that are making us tick. He's like, you know what? Adultery isn't the issue. That's bad. But lust is the issue. And so if you even look lustfully, that's the bad thing. Right? It's not murder that's the issue. It's if you even look at somebody with anger. That's the issue. And you know, you want to help other people, that's great, but why are you trying to help them? Because if it's all about you, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so Jesus is looking towards the internal motivations and the whole time raising the bar, the whole time pushing us to swim upstream against the current and to avoid going with the flow. In that same sermon, He's challenging us. to love our enemies. That sounds pretty countercultural to me. To love our enemies. I think probably all of us, oh yes, please, Jesus, sign me up. I want to take that class. Love my enemies. Right? To challenge us that the last shall be first. Right? We don't want to be last. Many of us, like going with the flow, like we're comfortable being middle of the pack. But being last, like, nah, I don't want to dwell there. But that's where Jesus commissions us to be. And then he talks about these two roads, right? So we've got the wide road that many are on. And then we've got the narrow road that it says that few find. Right? One leads to destruction, and the other one leads to life. I want to use that passage to kind of parallel what's going on here. Like you have the current, the go with the flow wide road, the one that most people are on. And then you have going upstream. It's a harder path. It's a narrower path. Fewer people are on that path. We're not even sure when we're on the path that we want to be on the path. But it's the only way that we get home. Right? Because you have to go up the stream to get home. It's the only way that we're really going to produce followers of Jesus Christ is by making it home so that we can go through the spiritual spawning process and produce more followers of Christ that can feed on the nutrients of our life that's been deposited. Right? But if we go with the flow, we're just swept right out to the ocean, just like everybody else. If we go with the flow, it's off to destruction. You know, to the big whale in the sea. Done. So what are we going to do about that? I think in reality, everyone is doing that. Going with the flow. But maybe it's time we reconsider and analyze which road that we're on. And maybe a really good question to ask is, if everybody else is doing it, is that really what I want to do? Is that really what I should be doing? And I remember this popular quote, and maybe you've heard it before. I'm not really sure who said it first. If everybody else jumped off a bridge, would you? Anybody's parents ever say something similar to that? And if you were like me, you probably said, I don't know, how high is the bridge? Yeah. How big is the fall? Are there any rocks below? Am I attached to a bungee strap? Like, there's lots of little nuances to that. But the reality is, like, I'm pretty much a coward. Like, no, I probably wouldn't jump. But the truth is still there. Like, are you willing to be different than everybody else? And that's a hard call. Right? Are you willing to be different at school? We've got some students that are here. Are you willing to stand out from what everybody else is doing? And I don't think very many of us are. Right? Because we don't want to be weird. We don't want to be strange. We don't want other people to talk about us or to not talk to us. Right? So we don't want to go against the flow of what everybody else is doing. Matter of fact, we show up at the party that we really didn't want to go to, with the people we really didn't want to hang out with, and we do the things we really didn't want to do so that we can impress the people we didn't want to hang out with. Because we don't want to stand out and be different. And it starts like in little bite-sized nuggets, doesn't it? Because it's like at the top of a stream. The water is just trickling. But before you know it, you're over a rapid. And the current's picking up. It's coming at a bigger pace, and the river is getting wider. And pretty soon, this fresh water has turned to salt water, and whoosh, we end up in the ocean of life going, how in the world did I get here? And that's what it's like when you just go with the flow. I mean, are you willing to stand out at work? How many of us, when we go to work, like we're in a workplace where we hear coarse joking, right? And for a while it's just kind of annoying, and then it becomes normal, and before long, like, you find yourself like actually being entertained by some of the jokes, and maybe even telling a few of them. right? The stories, the lifestyles, like we get caught up in them. The after work parties that are taking place, let's just go hang out. Are you willing to be different, to maybe hang with different people, to hang with less people, to not hang where they're at, to be able to stand up against some of the cultural currents that are around you? See, the reality is going with the flow is probably going to cost you. It's probably going to cost you some relationships. Right? It's probably going to cost you some of your favorite activities that you've enjoyed. I mean, people are going to probably bail on you. Change it up. Chances are, going against the flow is not going to be convenient. Gosh, I like convenience. There's something about like having the remote right next to you and like convenience. Like, oh, the remote's on the other side of the room. Maybe I'll just chill here and do something different. What makes us think like that? Am I the only one that's like, I don't know if I can get up, walk all the way across the room and grab that remote? Convenience is something that we just kind of gravitate towards because it's just going with the flow. Right? It doesn't challenge us to step up and to do things maybe a little bit different. It might mean, going against the flow is that you actually save sex until marriage. Like there's a countercultural idea. Right? It might mean that we have to reprioritize our spiritual health. That we actually study the Bible on our own, on a regular basis. That we make church or a small group a priority as opposed to an afterthought. If it's convenient. If I have time, if I feel up to it. Right? Going against the flow is probably going to cost you. It's going to change the way that you spend your money. It's going to change the way that you impact your friends or the friends that you hang out with. It's probably even going to change who you marry if you're not married yet. And so are you willing to go against the flow? Because swimming upstream doesn't happen by accident. Many of us would like that to happen, right? I just woke up today and I'm in a good place. You don't get there on accident. It takes hard work. It takes dedication. Not just going with the flow, because the moment you stop, you're swept downstream. But when you choose Jesus, you choose to die to yourself and to live in Him. When you choose Jesus, it says in Colossians, you take off your old self, your old garments, your old way of life, your old choices, all of those things, and you put them over here in the dirty clothes pile. Right? Left to be incinerated. So that you can move on to a new way of life, and you put on this new self, clothed into the image of Christ. And as you go through it, and I love it, like whether it's Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, like they're right there in your New Testament. Easy books to read, hard books to live. Right? Because it will challenge you. It'll say, these are the earthly things. And everybody's doing those. Those are the easy go with the flow things. But then there's this new way of life. Right? Few people find it. Even few people want to stick with it. And it's hard. Right? And it changes the way that you think, which changes the way that you feel, and it changes the things that you do. Are you willing to go through the tough changes? Because when you choose Jesus, you think and you act, at least you should, differently than you did before. And I guarantee you, differently than most of the people that you're going to encounter in this place we call earth. For many of us, one of our goals in life is simply to fit in. Right? We want the same clothes, the same cars, and the same homes that most people have. We want them furnished the same way, to look the same way. Well, as long as we're going the same direction, like we're still good with that. Sometimes like we wouldn't mind being the leader of the pack. Like I want the nicest car or the largest home. Like I actually want to be a part of some fad before it becomes popular, instead of buying it on clearance when it's done. Right? We wouldn't mind being ahead of the curve, but we get sometimes caught in this trap of mediocrity. right? This trap of doing what everybody else is doing. Many of us, growing up, we made fun of the weird kids. I'm pretty sure even the weird kids made fun of the weird kids. And if you didn't make fun of the weird kids, well, everybody else just thought you were weird. But it's all too common that we still make fun of the weird kids. If you walk into a factory today, I'm pretty sure you see a different variation on middle school. Many of you work in that life, right? You see it day in and day out. The weird kids still get made fun of. People still get pushed off to the side. And the last thing that you and I want to do is be a weird kid. Because we want to fit in, we want to belong. But normal's a relative term. And this is what I mean by that. Like you can go to California, and what's normal in California is not normal in New York. And neither one of them is Midwestern. And we kind of like it that way most of the time. Right? If you go to Africa, or you go to China, that's a different form of normal. And they're both different than what you're going to find in the United States. Middle school is different than high school, is different than college. Right? One generation, one culture is different from another. And you and I, in our efforts to fit in, the reality is it's a moving target and we're never going to hit it. Because as soon as you find the moving walkway and you step on, it starts moving a different direction. You finally got the coolest clothes, and now the coolest clothes are not cool anymore. It's something different. Right? Now you've got the newest car, but there's another one that's just come out. Right? The newest phone, you just can't keep up. But we try. We try a lot. I'm going to suggest there's 3 questions that we can ask that might help us on this journey to swim upstream. The first question is this: why am I doing this? Maybe some of you have heard of the Simon Sinek book, Start With Why. I think it's a very valuable concept. Start with why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you're not doing it for the right why, the right reason, then why in the world are you doing it? So have the right why in mind. Why are you doing it? Number 2, who are you trying to please? Are you trying to please the group of people that you're currently hanging out with? And don't think peer pressure doesn't happen within the church too. Right? Are you trying to please the people that you're hanging out with? The people that you want to hang out with? Maybe trying to please yourself? Maybe mom and dad? Or the kids? How much am I willing to pay? How much am I willing to pay? It's going to lead us to an evaluation process of what is taking place in our life. Why am I doing this? Who am I trying to please? What's it going to cost? Everything costs something, right? Because every time we say yes to something, we have to say no to something else. I mean, at least in my life, I've only got so many dollars in the bank account. And every time I say yes to spending on one thing, I have to say no to spending on something else. Right? I can't choose to pay the mortgage and choose something else at times, right? It's a big expenditure. The mortgage is not an option, right? It has to be a priority. So why am I doing it? Because I need a place to live. That would be nice. Right? It's winter in Nebraska. I kind of like to be indoors. So we need to have an important motivating factor of the why I'm doing what we're doing and who am I trying to please. Like, I'm pretty sure you guys don't have to live with my wife, and if my wife is unhappy, it's probably not going to impact you the way it's going to impact me. Right? And she kind of likes to have, a furnace at winter. And so we better pay the electrical bill and the heating bill. Like, that's an important thing. Right? Why? Who am I trying to please, and how much am I willing to pay? And sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes things cost way too much, and we're like, I guess I'll deal with not just last year's model, but maybe 20 years ago's model. And let's find a way to make it work, and if it breaks, we'll throw some Flex Seal on it or something. Right? We're going to make it work. We're going to find a way to make it happen, because we have to evaluate how much it costs. One way that you and I want to challenge us to look different is how we spend our time. Time is a funny thing. Right? Salmon take about 6 months to get up the river, if they make it, just so they can lay some eggs, create some babies, and die. I mean, in human terms, there's worse ways to go. But if you're going to go 6 months, they go without food during that 6 months. And they get there and they die. You know, time is a funny thing. Sometimes time goes by really fast. It flies. There's a lot of things that make time fly. Right? Have you ever been doing something that you really enjoy? It's a great activity, and especially with friends, and you look up at the clock and you're like, boy, where did the time go? Gosh, I know that we just got together like an hour ago. How come it's 4 hours later? I just got this new video game, and I was only going to play it for a little bit, and here it is 4 in the morning, and I need to get up in 2 hours. Where did the time go? That's not me, but I'm guessing somebody in here can relate. Right? Maybe we look down at the kids one day and we're like, dude, have you seen my kids? When did this happen? Right? Time sometimes just flies. And we can't seem to catch up. One day we just look in the mirror and we go, dude, I'm old. And sometimes time just drags. Right? Whenever you're in the 3rd trimester of a pregnancy, expecting the baby to come any time, it drags. Right? When you're waiting for somebody to get done with that conversation, my kids say this to me all the time, like, are we done yet? Can we go? Like, when you're in the waiting room, right? You're waiting for that test result to come back. And you just need to know what the answer is. The time just drags. When there's been an emergency, an accident, somebody's in the ER, and you're waiting for the doctor to come back with any kind of report, the time can just drag. When you're at the office or at school and you're looking at the clock and you're waiting for the bell to ring, you're waiting for the whistle to sound, and you're waiting to punch that time card and hit the weekend, the time can just drag. But here's the reality. Time is a funny thing. It always moves at the same pace. You and I have exactly the same amount of it. It's not like cash where you can go work at a different job and make a different amount than I can. You can work more or less and have more or less than I do. Like, time is something that's allocated to us, and we have 24 hours every day, and it doesn't matter who you are. You're rich, big deal. 24 hours, here you go. You're poor, generous. Hey, 24 hours, here you go. It's the same, regardless, right? It always moves at the same pace. And so it's not time that really matters. It's what we do with the time that matters most. Right? It's what we do with the time that counts. And so many of us, when somebody asks us, how are you doing? One of the most common responses that I hear is, I'm busy. It's like a status symbol. Right? It's not just like an instant messenger online thing, like busy. But that's what we carry around. It's like we get some sort of significance from, hey, my life is busy. No, it's like welcome to the club. Everybody's doing it. What do we say about everybody's doing it? Maybe you ought to take some time and figure out if that's the road you should be on. Right? If everybody is tired, stressed, burdened, overwhelmed, maybe that's not the road we want to be on. But we choose it anyway, don't we? Sometimes it chooses us because the current is moving rapidly. Right? And so we get caught up in school activities and workplace activities and family events and, yes, church events. Right? And we get to the end of the week and we're thinking, whew, I'm so glad that's over. And then we flip the calendar and what happens? Next week is just as busy. And we go, well, what about the following week? And the following, oh, I got nothing there. What are we going to do? And we pencil something in. Like a bunch of animals. We pencil it in. We don't know what to do when things are quiet. I'm the first to admit, like when I'm at home and I'm trying purposely not to work and the family is at school, I'm like, I'm bored out of my mind. I don't know what to do. I want something to do. So what do? You clean. Yeah. That's like a remote being across the room. What's the deal with that? It's a crazy thing. But you know what? I get it. Like we got 3 kids, 2 are in high school. Cross country, basketball, cheerleading, dance, student council, work. And they don't drive. So guess who's driving them? Mom and Dad Uber. Right? And we don't get paid. And so we just do that in addition to everything else that's going on. Right? And so we understand busy. We get that. And we've tried. We've tried to get our kids to only do one activity at a time. Because number 1, we can't afford it. Number 2, we can't afford to keep up with it. And it can get crazy. But it's so hard to continue to whittle that down and to keep track of your time. But here's an important lesson that we all need to learn. If you and I don't give ourselves margin, who's going to do it? Do you expect your workplace to give you margin? I don't think that's going to happen. Do you expect school to give you a margin? No, dude, next year, by the time Elijah's in marching band, he's going to be there in the morning for a marching band, all day at school, and then after school till 6 o'clock for an event, unless it's a game night or a band performance. And you know what? He's going to be at school from before I would normally wake up if I didn't have to take him someplace till it's time to go to bed again. Like school's not going to give you margin. Right? School is caught up in the same current of busyness that everybody else is. Right? And we're caught up in chasing all of these activities and thinking in some way, shape, or form, I'm going to feel significant because I've accomplished that. There's some way, shape, or form. My kids are going to be better because they're going to be busier than I was. I mean, yeah, it's the same breath that we say, oh yeah, I'm busy, and we wear it as a status symbol that we're like, dude, I am tired. I'm worn out. I can't wait for this to stop. I can't wait for something else to kick in. And what we don't realize is busyness just impacts everything. It impacts our marriages. We have too many people even here at Connection, right, that you are glorified roommates. You meet long enough to have a briefing so that you can pass the baton of children and move on to the next thing. And we've accepted it as normal, as okay. And our marriages are taking a toll, and our kids are taking a toll. Right? Our friendships, our free time, our health, it's all going out the window because we champion the cause of busyness. And one more thing to do. Am I ringing home with anybody? Like, I haven't cracked the cover of the Bible very much. I know that. But I'm really trying hard to plant a seed. To say, why in the world do we get so swept away with what everybody else is doing? And we think that in some way, shape, or form there's value in that. But at some point we have to realize that what everybody else is doing isn't working. Because they're just as stressed, just as crunched for time, just as broke as we are. And those are the people we're trying to keep up with. And it's time that we go against the flow. So instead of saying that we don't have time for something, because guess what? We all have the same amount of what? Time. It moves at the same pace, right? Instead of saying we don't have time, we have to make time for what's important. We have a one word for this that kind of captures that thought. It's called priorities. This is a dangerous word. It's one that we don't like to use very often unless it benefits us. Whenever we think, gosh, that person needs to examine their priorities, get things right? So that whenever they're home all day and I'm at school, that they're cleaning the house. Right, Lindsay? Just check it. Like, as long as those priorities align with what I think needs to be accomplished, then we got something good to go. But what I'm going to suggest to you guys is that our priorities need to be His priorities. And His priorities are going to lead us upstream, and we're going to have to stand out and we're going to have to be weird, and we're going to have to be different, we're going to have to do things differently. And so you and I, when we say yes to God, means we're going to have to say no to a lot of things that a lot of other people are doing, because what God wants us to do is more important. And there's always enough time to do what God wants us to do. Get this. The same God who made you has given you exactly enough time to do everything that He's got on your to-do list. The problem is you and I add to the to-do list. And we allow other people to add to our to-do list. It's as though we put it on a Google Drive and we open it up and say, hey, anybody want to add to my to-do list? It's just insane. But we do it. We go with the flow. So what are we saying yes to in our life? That's going to tell us what our priorities are. No matter what you tell me or anyone else is a priority for you, what you do in response actually determines your priorities. So you can tell me that your spouse is a priority, but if you never spend time with them or talk with them in a healthy manner, they are not a priority. You can say that you believe in God. You can say that you believe that Jesus died for you. If you're not surrendering to Jesus and living for Jesus, the reality is Jesus is not a priority. Am I ringing a bell? I hope I am. Because you and I, when we get swept away into this current, we miss the mark. And Jesus is calling us to a higher place, and to re-examine those priorities. Someone once said, the devil doesn't have to make you bad, he just has to make you busy. He doesn't have to make you bad, he just has to make you busy. Which makes me think of Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10 is this parable of the Good Samaritan. So we've got somebody who gets beat up alongside of the road, and we've got a priest walking up. Woo, the answer. Praise you, God. The priest is here. He's going to provide the answer, and he walks on by. Obviously, the broken man is not a priority. And then a Levite, the guys who care for the temple, he walks on by. Not a priority. But it's the Samaritan, the one that the Jews can't stand. He's the guy that actually takes the time to tend to the person who's been injured and to put them up. Right? He's the guy that cares for them in a well-found way. And he's the guy that wasn't too busy. And here's what happens to you and I in our life. Sometimes we get to a moment, maybe today, where we start to look backwards. We go, oh man, I missed all of those opportunities in life because I was too busy. The really sad thing is, you and I would be heartbroken by the opportunities we didn't even see because we were too busy. How many times do you and I, let's just be real for a moment, have our face so buried into a phone we don't see what's going on in the world around us? And that's exactly what happens when our misplaced priorities are leading our life. The average American spends 5 hours a day watching TV. And we don't have time for stuff? That number goes up to 8 hours a day when you factor in smart devices and gaming. 8 hours a day. That's a full-time job for many people. Right? And that's what we spend in front of an electronic device, staring at a screen. I know that's not everybody. And I hope that's not everybody. Right? Because we have way more important things to do in life than look at a screen. But I know how easy it is when Netflix or whatever streaming service says, are you still there? Like, yep, I'm still here. Shoot me the next one. Give me the next hit. I need it. Right? I know how easy it is to want that next fix, and it's so hard. But Romans 12:2 is where Paul is talking about being transformed. He's like, you know what? You need to not worry so much about being conformed to the pattern of the world around you, not being swept down this cultural current, this go with the flow, but you need to be transformed. You need to be changed. How? By the renewing of your mind. And then you will be able to test and prove what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. You and I, when we establish right priorities in the Word of God and we allow it to flow through the rest of our life, our mind gets changed. The way that we think actually changes. The way that we feel changes. The things that we do in our life, who we spend time with, it all changes. And just like that salmon who's fighting to get up that stream, like we are changed and we are pushing forward to something different. Something that most people would never understand, never be a part of. And that's the exact call that God is calling us on. But so many times we think, you know what? I got to just stay busy. I got to keep going on. I got to keep just pressing and doing and making things happen because God won't give me more than what I can handle. And so I've got to just handle what God's given me. And I'll say bold. Number one, it doesn't say that in the Bible. Look it up. Whatever source you want to use. God will give you more than you can handle. This is how I know it. Because God will let you fall on your face because He wants you to lean on Him. And if you're not leaning on Him, He will step away. And you will fall, and it will hurt. And God wants you to lean on Him. And the stuff that's in your life, quit blaming that on God. God did not make you do that. He did not sign you up for one more thing to do. Right? We have to take ownership. And we have to establish healthy priorities. And many of us say, you know what, if I only had more time in a day. Have you ever said that? If only there was one more day in a week. Yeah, I'd call the hogwash card on that one too. Right? Because it would almost be like giving a storage unit to a hoarder. It's only going to get filled with more stuff. Like we can say, if I had another day or another hour, then I would actually read my Bible. Then I would actually pray. Then I would actually make church a priority. Right? Then I would actually reach out to my neighbor or my coworker or my classmate. But the reality is we would just cram it full more of the stuff that's already got us overwhelmed. So what are we going to do about it? You see, it's not about having more time. It's about better time management and better priorities. I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think we push so hard to keep up with everybody else. 3 reasons. Number 1, we just want to keep up with everybody else. It's not overly complicated. We don't want to stick out. We don't want to be weird. The second one is this. It makes us feel valuable. We feel valuable when we're busy, when we're doing something. But it's the third one that I want to punch you in the face with. Thanks. Let's be real. We don't trust God. We don't trust God. You see, when we try to control our time, we miss the mark of the one who created 7 days, 24 hours in a day. Right? The same one who in 6 days created Genesis, but on the 7th day He did what? Yeah. We're way more important than God. We don't need to rest. How about when He got to the 10 Commandments and He's having this conversation with some dude named Moses? You write this down, number 4. Remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. On the 7th day, rest in me. Yeah, dude, that one's just not very current anymore, is it? See, I think the problem is we don't trust God. And so in order to get things right, the answer is we have to trust God. And this is how we trust God. We remember the Sabbath and we keep it holy. We rest in Him. The only way that we stop the rat race, that we get off the moving walkway, is to stop. Nobody's going to hit stop for you. But I can guarantee you that each one of us, at some point in time, either we're going to choose to stop or God is going to stop us. Right? He will realign our priorities. I'm guessing that we have some people in here today that have had their priorities realigned by God. And that thing wasn't that big of a deal until it was. Right? Diet and exercise wasn't that big of a deal until you realized if you didn't do it, you were going to die. And so now you just begin to get things right. And so we have to pause. We have to rest in God. So do you trust God more than your own efforts? What's your next step? I'm going to challenge you guys with a few things here today. Number one is take an inventory of your time. How are you spending your time? What are you saying yes to? Maybe over in another column, what would you like to say yes to? What are you willing to say no to so that you can say yes? So evaluate your time and realign your priorities. You're probably going to have to say no. And you're going to have to stop. But I want to make sure that you don't just stop. Here's the challenge, guys. It's to rest in God. Matthew 11, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Guys, this is a promise in Jesus among this earth that we're on. But it's also a forward-arching promise to a day when Jesus comes back and brings us to heaven and restores heaven on earth and gives us a place of rest. But we don't have to wait there to establish a healthy pattern. I'm guessing this is a message we can all put into practice, even today.